हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम टू माय यूट्यूब चैनल द सोलफुल डायरी। आज के वीडियो में हम बात करेंगे फिलिप लार्किन की पोम दिस बी द वर्स के बारे में। पोएट के बारे में हम पहले ही एक वीडियो में डिस्कस कर चुके हैं, जिसका लिंक डिस्क्रिप्शन में। चलिए आज पोम को इन डेप्थ डिस्कस करते हैं। पोम को इन डेप्थ डिस्कस करने से पहले जान लेते हैं उसके कुछ की फीचर्स। दिस बी द वर्स बाय फिलिप लार्किन इज अ पावरफुल पोम। इट्स अबाउट द इंटेंस relationships between children and their parents. This poem sounds like a proclamation. This should be the verse, as there's nothing more to say while introspecting on parenthood in the modern world. It's a warning to the parents as well as the kids who are either figuring the emotional battle on the verge of a dramatic extinction. The poet feels no shame while saying, "They fuck you up, your mum and dad." In this be the verse, yes, they do mess up with one's sentiments and feel nothing while burdening one with their emotional baggage. Larkin is angry yet rational about what he implies in his best known poem. In this poem, the poet presents a full cycle. In the first stanza, the poet refers to the prison scenario. Here they or the parents fill their kids with the faults they had and add some extra of theirs as a contribution to their children's future. Whereas in the second stanza, Larkin refers to the past. At some point in the past, some fool eventuated the cycle. They fucked their future generation. Henceforth, the parents of today are filled with the faults of yesterday. Lastly, the poet hints at the future and strongly claims that the only way to exit from this cycle is not having kids. The poem talks about the emotional baggage or faults that parents bestow on their children. However, the meaning of the title provides a key to the idea of the poet. It means that the poet is going to describe in his poem should happen in society. The last stanza, he provides the solution to the problem. Moreover, there is a sense of laxity in the title. The poem Poet isn't in the mood to write something applauding or uplifting, so the title can be a reference to the first line of the poem or the versification used by the poet. While dealing with modern problems and the cycle that has been in motion for a long time, the poet thinks this should be the proper response to society. The poem is divided into three stanzas. Each stanza of the poem contains four alternative rhyming lines. The rhyme scheme of the poem is ABAB and it goes on like this. However, in the first stanza, do and you contain an imperfect rhyme. Apart from that, there are a total of 8 syllables in each line. Each word contains an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. That's why the overall poem composed of perfect iambic tetrameter. There are no such variations in the poem. चलिए पोम को इन डेप्थ डिस्कस करते हैं। स्टैंजा 1. They fuck you up, your mom and dad. They may not mean to, but they do. They fill you with the faults they had and add some extra just for you. This be the verse by Philip Larkin begin with the most quoted line of modern literature. They fuck you up, your mom and dad. It means the conventions of society as a whole mess up with parents as well as their children. Those who blindly follow the absurd rules try to behave rationally and sagaciously. In reality, they do fuck one's mind and kill one's individuality. They act like hypocrites while guiding the next generation. Moreover, the poet says those people or parents with such a mindset fill others with their faults. They don't even stop there and contribute some extra faults to the younger mind. Here the poet directly addresses the reader. In this way, he refers to the universality of the poem. Stanza 2. But they were fucked up in their turn by fools in old-style hats and coats, who half the time were soppy stern and half at one another's throats. The second stanza of this be the verse refers to the past when their process began. When they were kids, their parents also burdened them with their emotional baggage. Here, the poet refers to the older generation as fools in old style, hats and coats. So by referring to their garments, the poet ironically points to their intellectual poverty. They were showy class and blind followers of the god named convention. Moreover, the poet sarcastically remarks that they were soppy stern. Here the poet uses alliteration, however, whatsoever the term refers that the older generation was over sentimental and stern in their beliefs. Half the time they were busy fighting while others were over meaningless things. Stanza 3. Man hands on misery to man. It deepens like a coastal shelf. Get out as early as you can and don't have any kids yourself. In these lines, the poet is trying to say, uh, and he tries to tell us about the future of this process. The end stop line in the stanza as well as in the first stanza sound like rigid statements. What the poet says is harsh yet true. However, according to the poet, man unknowingly or knowingly hands over misery to another man. Like a chain reaction, the latter hands over it to another, and the process goes on. It deepens like a coastal shelf unobserved. Moreover, the decaying of the coastal shelf is a reference to the harm the parents caused to the early minds. The last two lines, the poet provides a solution. He advises the younger generation to get out of this insufferable cycle as early as one can. And the poet advises future parents not to have kids. Thus, one can break the chain reaction and release the free spirit of mankind. As the poet talks about a theme that is frustrating in itself, however, there are some instances where the poet uses a few literary devices. For example, in the title This Be the Verse, the poet uses an allusion to the poem Requiem by Robert Louis Stevenson. The poet adopts the line, This be the verse you grave for me of Stevenson's poem and modified it in his way. Thereafter, there is a metaphor in the usage of the pronoun they. Here, the poet refers to conventional society. Moreover, the overall poem contains irony. In the second stanza, there is sarcasm in the line. By fools in old style, hats and coats. Here, in hats and coats, the poet uses synecdoche. In the third stanza, there is a metaphor in the first line. Here, the poet compares misery to something that the older generation bestows on the next generation. There is a simile in the next line, and here the poet compares misery to a coastal shelf. However, the last two lines contain an epigram. Themes. This Be the Verse by Philip Larkin presents some important themes such as convention, parenthood, emotional baggage, hypocrisy, and mental suffering. In this poem, the poet criticizes the conventions of society that our generation somehow tries to pile on the next generation. They don't care about the individuality of a person and wish everyone should contain a similar vestige. Moreover, the theme of parenthood is an important theme of the poem. Here, the poet describes how parents will kids with their faults. Apart from that, the theme of hypocrisy is another theme to point out here. The theme is present throughout the poem. For example, they may not mean to, but they do refer to the hypocritical attitude of conventional people. However, Larkin also talks about the emotional baggage and mental suffering of children that deepen like a coastal shelf. This Be the Verse by Philip Larkin is a lyric that was written around April 1971. It was first published in the August 1971 issue of New Humanist and also appeared in the 1974 collection High Windows. It is one of the best Philip Larkin poems, and the opening lines are frequently quoted. Larkin himself compared this poem with Lake Isles of Innisfree by W.B. Yeats. However, in this postmodern poem, Larkin refers to the hypocritical attitude of modern society and how it burdens kids with the faults of mankind as a whole. Moreover, there is a reference to break the chain and cherish the modern free spirit. थैंक यू। आई होप आज की वीडियो आपको पसंद आई। कैसी लगी हमें कमेंट करके बताएं और हमें ये भी कमेंट करके बताएं कि आप आने वाली वीडियो किस टॉपिक पर देखना चाहते हैं। अगर वीडियो अच्छी लगी तो लाइक शेयर एंड सब्सक्राइब टू माय चैनल। मिलते हैं कल शाम 4 बजे एक और इन्फॉर्मेटिव वीडियो के साथ। टिल देन कीप वॉचिंग एंड कीप सपोर्टिंग द सोलफुल डायरी। थैंक यू।